All right, welcome to Community Talks. Podcast is a part of the Rocky Mountain Partnership. We are really excited to be here for what is the first of many episodes that will be really focused around elevating community voices and building community power. And today we're going to dive in a little bit to what that conversation actually means and what those topics actually look like. So my name is Matt Horn. I'm a facilitator for the Rocky Mountain Partnership Backbone team. Very fortunate today to be joined by Diana Bustillos, who is our communications manager for the Backbone team.
Hello, I'm Diana Bustillos, and I'm very, very happy to be part of this first episode. I'm also part of the Backbone team, and let me introduce you to another team member of the Backbone team. She is Isabel Rodriguez, and not also a team member, but also part of this community. She grew up here in Adams County, and she's going to school here as well. Isabel.
Yeah, hi, I'm Isabel. I'm 21 years old, and I grew up in Adams County my whole life, and now I get the opportunity to be a part of this partnership and help the community that I grew up in as well. And like Diana said, I am going to CU Denver as well this semester, so I'm very excited about that and to talk about the challenges that we face.
So Isabel is one of many community leaders, community members that we have in this community as a part of the Rocky Mountain Partnership, which we'll talk about just really briefly, but also really excited to introduce Peter LiFari, who is the Executive Director of Maiker Housing and also one of the co-champions for the Building Community Power work of the partnership.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here. Humbled that I've been asked to participate and just eager to learn and leave today feeling more uplifted than when I came in. So it's fantastic to be here with such inspiring and talented individuals. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Maria Gonzalez, who is the Executive Director of Adelante Community Development. So Maria, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Matt, and everybody in the team. I think it's important for us to, in 21st century right now, what is going on with our communities? How do we really identify the opportunity to engage and to inspire others to do good and to be part of that changing opportunities that we have in front of us in every industry? And so thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and let's jump into this conversation.
So I'm really excited to have this first, again, of many conversations, and really this one to kind of set the tone for what this work is and why these conversations are really important. And the way that our partnership has been talking about this work is that really it's intended to do two things. One is to elevate the voices of community members, especially those that are most marginalized because of race, ethnicity, age, disability status, gender, zip code, all of those things. And also to identify where there's opportunities to move to action. And that's really where we want to think of this conversation as not just business as usual, not just some conversation that's being had by, 5 people sitting in a room together, but really where are there opportunities for you all to take action as community leaders? Where's there opportunities to mobilize the partnership to action? So how can we really get to some results that we know we need to see and really move this conversation to get to that point? So as I mentioned, this is a conversation that is really driven by what the work of the Rocky Mountain Partnership is. So Peter, as co-champion of the Building Community Power work, can you talk just a little bit about the partnership, the vision and mission, and kind of who that partnership is that's doing this work?
Yeah, Matt, I think you hit the nail on the head there. This is about engaging upon the members of our community whose gifts and talents and strengths have not been illuminated at the level that is required, deserved, and actually essential for a vibrant, thriving Adams County. If we don't embody the idea of nothing about us without us, then we will continue to replicate the systemic elements of our society that has otherized the heartbeats that make up the beauty of our community. And so if any of us care about equality, inclusion, opportunity, wealth, power, then we have to be vested in this conversation. And as a white man, of privilege, is my duty to stand in the front and utilize that privilege via vulnerability to open doors and share that privilege and power to community members that unfortunately have not been. And so by the grace of, frankly, the color of my skin, I've been allowed to assimilate. I am the son of immigrants, but ultimately, we were allowed to assimilate. And what we want to do in Adams County via the Rocky Mountain Cradle to Career Partnership is start to not just talk about moving the needle, but actually move that needle through power shift, power sharing, and power giving. And that's why we're really here today, and to harness the voice of our youth, to harness the voice of all Adams County members who have felt that their voice hasn't been harnessed. And so, we're gonna dive into some data, and take a look at. I'm pulling through here. Hold on one second. So just so I'm clear on it, we want to use data to set shared targets as a scorecard to measure progress. So we're going to ask leaders in this community, entities in this community, institutions, anchor institutions, for-profit entity, nonprofit entities, to be vulnerable and transparent, and to understand that there's safety and strength in that vulnerability. And so we are going to peel back the onion a little bit here and ask folks to take a deep dive into their practices, policies, procedures, and and make sure that leadership looks like the community for which they serve. And so, that advocate for policies and the funding to remove those barriers so that we accelerate progress. We have such a strong opportunity here with a coalition of not just the willing, but the committed. And so we're going to bring in cross-sector stakeholders, and we're going to collectively impact economic and social mobility throughout Adams County, the city of Aurora, and the city of Broomfield. If not us, who? If not now, when?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we talk a lot, as a partnership, the partnership talks a lot about this work not being business as usual. And a big piece of that is because it is led by community leaders like you all, who are coming together and saying, where is there opportunity for us to not only look within our own organizations and look within ourselves, but to collectively build that power of the community and to collectively elevate those voices that have been systemically marginalized. And I think one of the things before we dive too far in is that we don't expect this to be a place to know all the answers. So we don't come to this table saying, what are the answers? What are the things that absolutely have to be done? But again, what we do want to do is from move to talk to action, and to have these conversations lead to a place where we're moving towards a shared result. So with that, excited to really dive into our conversation and start to talk about what it looks like to really build that power of the community.
I think, Matt, one of the things that I've continued to face as an immigrant in Adams County is the lack of having people to listen to our needs. Yes, listen, but also validate. I came from Mexico when I was 13. I'm one of 14 children, and my parents worked in Adams County in agricultural fields. And just knowing the potential that when I came here at 13 years old, now at 47, being an entrepreneur, running an organization that serves back to the community, I would have never had that opportunity had not been, knocking the doors and crying about that opportunity, seeking every single time. And not everybody has the same, the same mentorship. But if we're able to build on a listening campaign, and understanding all of the different levels of community, from our undocumented, our immigrants, our established, our first generations, and number of generations, and coming to an agreement that we're all human beings, we all want the same, we're looking for the American dream, whatever that looks like, and have the ability to be listened to and catered to in a way of commitment, right? And I've done my work. I've done my school, I've raised my children, I've committed to so many nonprofit organizations throughout the last almost 30 years back into the community. But in reality, how many people are devoted to make sure that our needs are validated, that our voices are heard, and that commitment to an overall change in opportunities that make it equal for all? And I think, having this conversation in regards to housing, small businesses, education, all of these opportunities are open. But how do we get into that? What is the main focus from our elected officials, from our government employees? How do we really open the doors and make sure that everybody that wants to get in gets in? Because of course we're not going to convince everybody to have a better life. We're not. But those that want, if we're able to accelerate that process on listening and validating.
Maria, you work with a lot of Spanish-speaking members in the community and business owners. What has your experience been with their voices being heard or not heard, like the people that you specifically work with?
Yes, a very good question. The reason I founded Adelante Community Development is because of that main reason. Our Latino businesses continue to be entrepreneurs. They invest all of the money that they have and all of the time. However, they don't have the knowledge on how to run businesses. And their voices were never heard, talking about how the cities has changed rules, regulations, inspections, process. And our Latino entrepreneurs, they want to do good. They have a family that is depending on them, and they have, a community that depends on building that sustainability, economic development in those small businesses, but their voices haven't been heard. And, one of the main things that I always think about how Denver has a small business development center, they have Mi Casa Resource Center, they have the ability to get support. Adams County does not. We do not have a Latino resource center where our families could be educated and empowered, and our businesses could be advocated on behalf and identified gaps like access to capital, basic business practices that are going to make it more efficient. And that's why when I founded Adelante in 2010, I figured that we really needed to grow a model that supports and engages and empowers the Latino entrepreneurs in Adams County. And we've grown so much in the last couple of years because of that need continues to be a priority. But we need to receive the support from the county, from the cities, to validate what is our percentage of Latino businesses in every single one of our cities, because those families or those businesses have a family that needs to be represented in the county. And so it's a process of acknowledging who do we have, and I think that's back to the elected officials and back to the government agencies. Who do we have in our communities, and how do we validate the needs and work together on that? We cannot continue to work on silos and really have to work, what is the overall family need to make them strong, to make them sustainable, and then give that support to the small businesses as well. Spanish-speaking businesses continue to grow, not only in Adams County, but throughout the state. And we cannot continue to rely on one Denver agency to provide those services that are needed outside.
Yeah, and I think vulnerability is something that comes into play a lot, that everyone is really scared of, How you said change is giving up power, and not a lot of people want to do that, but we need to have these uncomfortable conversations that shouldn't be considered uncomfortable, Like, we should all be open to being vulnerable and saying what we need to say, and as community members, having the confidence as well to not feel like you're going to get shut down with the perspective that you have or the suggestions that you have as well, because you are a community member and you're the one that's being affected by this, so you obviously have suggestions as to what you need to improve your own life. And we used to use this quote a lot before: there is something fundamentally amiss about building or rebuilding a system without any point consulting those that it's intended to serve. And that's something that we've noticed, is that these decisions have been made without ever including the community. And I just want to ask you, Peter, what has your experience been with not having community members in the decision making?
It's everything. And I think, I believe that as humans, we're benevolently flawed. I don't think that most folks wake up in the morning to do harm to their fellow human and community member. So I think acknowledging the fact that we all have these well intentions, but we don't have a playbook and a language and a lived experience that models how our behaviors should play out in this construct, as you shared as well. So, what I find is that, when I got to the agency, we had amazingly well-intended, heart-driven makers, which we call staff, but since we didn't have that common language, we were acting in different ways, which created uncertainty and disclarity for our members, who we call those that we exist to serve, right? And we call them members to change the paradigm from, customer transaction, right? Because we're not here to sell folks stuff. We're here to listen. We're here to be that point of respite, right? So let's get you stably housed, then let's let you heal, and God willing, when you're ready to trust us, if ever, you reach out your hand, you invite us into your home, we sit at your kitchen table, and we really start to talk about how humans have come together to overcome obstacles since time immemorial. And so if you're not doing that with your members, with your community, you're selling them goods that they don't want or need, right? And so, in business school, there was this term called the ugly baby syndrome. And whenever I say it, people are like, oh, what's that? And it's just this idea that if you don't engage with the intended audience of your product, your service, your being, your why, then you're going to create something that has no value and meaning, and then no one wants it, right? And so, the majority of folks that we serve just happen to be without money. Does that mean that they have no gifts and power? No. The famous American economist Milton Friedman said there's only one difference between those that are wealthy and those that are not, and it's money, right? And so, when we engage with a member of community and we say, hey, I noticed that perhaps your bank account, might be a little below what we would like it to be. Would you like financial counseling or coaching? If we do that before having a relationship that's built on trust and altruism and empathy and honesty, they're going to feel like we're selling them a car, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing against car salesmen, because it's a noble job, but most folks are turned off when I just meet you and you're now trying to tell me what my needs, wants, and desires are, right? And so what we need, what we've really focused on is building that trust quotient is then the force multiplier for everything else. And actually, we learn more than we give, right? And because as we strive at the Housing Authority to be an anchor institution, then we should be bringing in the gifts and talents and being influenced and molded and shaped by those that we exist to serve. If not, then we're just being a transactional bureaucracy, and that's not what we're about.
I wanted to open this question up to both Peter and Maria. Do you think that leaders are afraid to shift or build community power, or are they unwilling to, or do you think that they just don't understand how to shift that power?
I think some leaders are afraid to lose power, and that reflects on their poor leadership ability, because being in a position of leadership, you respect the community that you serve. You identify areas of opportunity. You bring gaps, remove barriers, right? That is your role as a leader. However, a lot of people that are in leadership, they're for their own personal gain. Yeah. And that is the uncomfortable situation, where if they're going to take that power away from you, what does that mean financially? And then how do you look in the community when they take your title away, or they take your privileges? And so people are afraid of that, and that means they're not real leaders that we need to be hold in the community. I think that all of the leaders need to be held accountable to their community standards and to the promises that they make. But we as community members also make a lot of assumptions that we have great leadership when we never really hold them accountable. And that is a tremendous opportunity that we have in front of us to really analyze. Having political gain is so important to move forward the policies that will make a community more equitable and more sustainable. But sometimes, you get paid to do something else. And that's where the moral of that community that you're serving really needs to hold you back and say, look, we elected you for a position, or you are representing this organization, and this is we expect. And I think that's where we as community members also lack the way to validate those leaders and bring them back to accountability. And this last year, we've seen, how the pandemic has made leaders succeed or leaders fail because of that lack of leadership in different industries. And we have that opportunity right now to say, okay, where can you really bring the community forward and acknowledge that you as a leader have that responsibility. No one else. You decided to commit either with a title or with a position in political areas. So now you come forward. And my advice would be to some of these leaders that are not able to be at that level to just leave office or to leave their position of power and let somebody else that is going to really make the difference and validate those community needs and acknowledge that you are not capable of doing that. And that's for me to say this today, I'm not afraid to do that. But a few years ago, I was so afraid to challenge individuals because I didn't know what the feedback I would get or retaliation. But I've realized that I am very resilient, and I represent a lot of the resilient community that continues to fight. And this is a fight for leadership, and whoever needs to be in that position needs to be held accountable to the highest standards.
And well, I was gonna say, Peter, that's one of the things that you and I actually just recently talked about was like this idea of shifting power and how that is such a fear of so many people, who have held decision-making power or who don't. Like, just that idea of shifting is, I think, one of the biggest challenges to this work. And what I like what about you said was that it's building, right? It's like how to move forward. And so I was just wondering, could you talk a little bit about that, like building on the community power?
Yeah, vulnerability and transparency is a theme that's been coming up during our conversation already. I think first off, if you don't have mentors that you see and feel and have been modeled what it means to shift power and how that is a healthy dynamic that is a triple bottom line driver, right? Most folks think if I give power, I lose power. Mm-hmm. It's not a zero-sum game, right? What it is about, the best organizations, the best teams, the best leaders, they distill their culture down into its behaviors, into its essentials, and then they debate the heck out of it, right? And they beat it up because they love it so much that they give it that investment that it deserves. And so, there's a great author, his name's Adam Grant, and he wrote a book. He has a theory, he's wrote a few books, and he organizational psychology, and he has a theory, right? There's three types of folks, right? There's givers, matchers, and takers, and givers are the most rare and the most valuable. They're not normally your top performers because they're so busy helping everyone else, but they're so valuable because they're never going to leave someone behind. Matchers are the most common. Doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means most folks are risk adverse, right? There's a lot of threats and dangers in society, especially in America, where we're so tethered to our profession that it becomes who we are. And what we find is that in privileged circles, the belief that you can give to grow is very antithetical to what has been modeled to us, right? And so is it any surprise that we do not see this kind of transfer and gift and growth of power? Because folks are scared. They're scared. They might not be able to articulate it that way. It might be like, well, I did X, Y, and Z. I went to school. I served, right? And there's other opportunities. When in reality, the more diverse we are, the more vulnerable we are, the more successful we are. And I'll end and say is that, as being blessed to serve as executive director of the Housing Authority, the buck stops with me. If there's a mistake, I have to look in the mirror first, right? It's probably because I didn't give enough resources. I didn't allow folks to fail in a safe way, because that's how we grow. And so, as leaders, again, I think it comes back down to who are your mentors? How often have you been allowed to fail? And then if you can kind of translate that into a language that is germane to your space, your segment of the economy, be it in a nonprofit, being in an activist organization, be it, and I think our county manager does a good job of this, frankly, right? Like, let's come in, let's talk through things. If you don't have those elements, what you have is just the entrenched establishment, which in America has really been born out of inequality, right? And unless we're willing to say, as a houser, I think this is important. When I first got into housing, I was like, oh, we're not Cabrini Green or Pruitt-Igoe. These are big public housing communities that are no longer, right? And they were the bastions of what, you know, was bad about public housing, low-income housing, immigrant communities. And what I realized was, no, you're an idiot. No, Peter, you actually are Pruitt-Igoe. You are Cabrini Green. You are a torchbearer of those that came before us. And if you do not acknowledge that as a leader, then I am at a greater probability of repeating those mistakes. And so now when I go into a community, it's not just about what does the architecture look like, or what is the, you know, social determinants of health, to use a buzz term. It's like, what is the essential strengths of this community, and how do I do no harm, right? And if I do no harm and invite folks into the conversation, I am going to learn so much more, and we're going to have such a more vibrant community development program system, because it's not about me, right? It's not about me. I'm blessed to be the conductor, but frankly, I would rather be behind the scenes, allowing the heartbeats and talents and gifts of all the makers at the authority that are the true champions of the work. Put them out front, get out of their way, right? Tell them where the sandbox ends so that they know where they're safe and where they're not. Explain critical and non-critical failures so that folks again feel safe. And then it's amazing what can happen, because folks feel seen, they feel heard and valued and vested. And if you do that, I find that it's easier to shift power. Without that, and leaders would say, well, I have too many employees for that, or that's too soft of a skill, I don't have time to do that. I would encourage folks to look at the greatest organizations in their sector, right? Whatever that might be, education, it might be finance, it could be nonprofit, whatever. I guarantee you the entities that you admire the most are the most vulnerable and the quickest to critique themselves, because that's how they survive. And they've realized that through trial and error. And you can only have trial and error if you give people a safe harbor to be their true selves, not a false construct of what white America has dictated as, you know, standard or what you should be, right? So I think that's really how I go about it as well.
And I think you have to have that trial and error. You have to have that error as like a critical piece of that. And you also, like, this work is changing systems. This is not a snap your fingers, make a change, and then, you know, we're gonna see the impact. This is long-term work that takes years and years of building and of changing the way that people think. And I think that's one of the difficulties about this work, and it's also one of the really exciting things about this.
When people trust you, they tell you what they feel. That's not always comfortable, right? But as a leader, if your folks are telling you how they feel, you're doing the right thing.
Yep.
You're doing the right thing. Don't run away from that. Don't just say, go down the hall to human resources. Realize that, that individual that you drafted, right? I'm a big sports fan, and, it's like, hey, no, I'm not gonna just get rid of my quarterback because I wasn't happy, with their performance at this time. We're all growing together. View people as assets, not commodities meant to be consumed and discarded. And in America, and I think we're changing, thank goodness, finally, because we have to, right? But this idea that, you're no better than, some sort of commodity that I purchased to build a community. It's not about the bricks and sticks in housing. It's about the heartbeats. And once you forget about that, you're on a path of divestment and non-diversity.
So we talk so much about so many subjects, and all of them are interesting, but we just talk. So the people that are listening to this podcast and the people that are viewing this video, they may be thinking, like, what can I do? What can I do as a community member to make those changes? What can I do as a business owner? What can I do as a leader in this community to make those changes? So what are your suggestions, Maria and Peter? Because there's a lot of people that can be listening to this and they get it, they understand, but they don't know how to help make that change.
I think it really depends of the community member that is listening to. For example, if you're a business owner, I would encourage you to identify what are the areas of opportunities that you have. What is it that you know, and what is that you don't know, and what are you really passionate about to make a change, right? And then pursue that. Call people, ask questions,
And listen.
But also, take that opportunity to. I think all of us through the pandemic now, over a year after the pandemic, we have to be very objective. Like, what have we learned as individuals, as members of the community, as business owners? What have we learned that will help us be better and improve, right? Now, if it's a family, I definitely want this family to be empowered and to know that there's people like us that are looking to help these families in those opportunities or gaps in services. We're fighting every day. I send emails to elected officials. I call leaders in different government organizations, because that's where policy is made. And I think as a community, if we're able to make policy and work hand in hand with our elected officials and really identify those opportunities, then we can start to make that change. And as leaders in our community, we need to start raising the voice. So I was so excited about this podcast today, because this is what we need to be doing, and more often, really bringing stakeholders that are true to the values of a better Adams County. And how do we hold each other accountable, work together, identify those paths of success, and identify challenges and barriers that we've had, and work on them. Homelessness. We have a problem with our community, and I know has been some efforts. We need to do more. Latino Resource Center, Adams County, 41% Latinos. We do not have a Latino Resource Center for Adams County. Where are we on that? How do we really move forward? So I think it really depends on where you are as a community member. My advice would be to start, yes, listening, but now is more like the action. Yeah. Let's get shit done.
That's the name of the podcast.
Something I wanted to touch on was accountability, how you mentioned. I have seen on social media basically since last year during the pandemic that we all bully the politicians into doing what we need, with the stimulus checks, with all these other different things. It's literally everyone gaining up on them and telling them consistently, this is what we need, this is what we need, when are you going to do it, when are you going to do it, until they do it. And that's something that we forget, and something that I don't even think about is advocating. We have power in numbers, and the community really does need to stand up and openly say, this is what we need, these are different things that could help us. So now what are you going to do? And I think with this podcast, we really want to call out other community members to come and join, or just give us your guys' perspective as well, with your experience to the challenges and different ways that it could all be fixed.
I'm sure they would hire me, but how many of us would not have not even the opportunity to fill out an application?
Yeah.
Because the application has those minimum requirements that is a bachelor's or master's. And at 47, I'm not willing to spend so much money and time when things that I've already experienced. So, we making sure that we have open doors for those that do have the skills and the talents, and then bring opportunity for mentors that are able to support those employees through programs that will get them, that better job or that leadership opportunity. But it does take commitment on making sure that you understand who you're hiring and how you're leaving your legacy in leadership. I also feel that a lot of people take in those leadership positions forever. Like, we really need to bring new leaders, being mentored, and let go of your titles, let go of you being in that same position for 20, 30, 40 years. Like, let your legacy be the mentorship opportunity for new generations.
Teenagers, people who know nothing about life, to navigate through life.
Right.
And now they are the ones having to deal with the consequences, with not having these opportunities when they're older, because other people refuse to give them the support they needed, because community leaders aren't taking into account what community members are going through, you know? If any of us were asked, what could possibly make your high school experience better, I'm sure all of us would have given suggestions to make our experience a lot easier, you know? It's one thing being in IB classes and like having literally, I would be in school from 7 a.m. until like 3 p.m. and then go home afterwards and not even go to bed. Like I would literally not even go to bed just to finish all my homework. And then even then, some days going to school or going after school to work for a couple hours too. And then considering other students who have to work full time, you know, I knew a lot of kids in my high school who were working full time as 16-year-olds, you know, to provide for their family. How are they possibly able to focus on school when they have to work full time?
Lots to learn and lots to do.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, to make that shift and make sure that we continue to listen and take action on these opportunities that we have. And, you know, thinking about our youth population in Adams County, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I am not saying that I struggled at all. I really understand that there are other people who have faced harder challenges than me, you know, and that's what we also have to really focus on and give them the opportunity to speak on, because the challenges that I faced are very, very different than the challenges that they faced, you know? It's like everything I faced plus more.
And I think that's where the biggest opportunity for work exists, is the individual has to be heard. We have to be taking into account what it is that each person is saying so that supports can be tailored and strategies can be done for individuals. And at the same time, where are their themes? Where are we hearing the same thing coming from individuals from a certain population or certain background where there's opportunities for action? And so in terms of, you know, what next steps look like, I mean, we talked about where opportunities for action are at the organizational level, at the individual level, as a collective partnership where you all see opportunities to move work forward and to really create the improvements within this community. But it is systems change. It is long-term work that is going to take a long time. So thank you all so much for your time, sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your stories and perspectives, and then where you all see opportunities. So really this conversation will continue.
For me, it would be policy. I will be scheduling some meeting with our elected officials to identify, you know, what, based on our experience, particularly in the last year, that more of the barriers came to light. And we have this opportunity with the funding that is coming to the state. How can we really leverage policy and action to make sure that we don't leave people behind?
Yeah, I agree completely with Maria. I think also, you know, trusting in the stakeholders, my fellow leaders, enough to be a bit more aggressive in asking them for their help, as opposed to, you know, just hoping that they're on their way, right? Because that way it could take a long time, and just investing in the relationships and their strengths to tell them, hey, this is what we need, and we need it now. And how can we do this together? Because oftentimes those questions, those types of statements are what's lacking in the collababble kind of tough dynamics. So, you know, and then I think just continuously believing in people and dreaming big and planting a lot of seeds, right? A lot of seeds that, you know, eventually will sprout. And so that way we have continuous action, right? So continuously, you know, developing more communities that serve extremely low income individuals, because if not us, then they're not going to happen. And then, you know, really utilizing the Housing Authority as a hub of innovation where folks can come in and they can community organize, they can influence our behaviors. We have a community organizing initiative at the organization, and we're growing that strategically. And just making sure that, you know, I put my money and my actions where my mouth is, and not being afraid to ask other leaders to do the same, because I believe that they're capable of doing it.
Yeah.
So this conversation will continue. Again, thank you all for being here so much. To learn more about opportunities for action, look in the description for this episode, or wherever it is that you're viewing this. Look for opportunities to connect with our Backbone team, to connect with our partners and our champions of this work, to learn about how you can get involved further, and then share thoughts on social media or on your platforms. The way that we lift the voices of community members and really elevate and get them out is by sharing. So please feel free to share and lift your thoughts back to our team, and any opportunities you see for future episodes, future conversations, we'd love to hear. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Isabel and Matt. It's been a pleasure. So see you at future episodes.
This was an amazing conversation between community leaders and community members around where they saw the biggest opportunities to elevate community voices and to do work to build community power. And that is really what the work of the Rocky Mountain Partnership is, to support the economic and social mobility of all community members, specifically those most marginalized because of race, ethnicity, gender, age, disability, circumstance, zip code, all of those things.
But this work could not be successful without the community members with lived experience, informing about the decisions and taking those positions of leadership.
So to support this work, the partnership is taking action. And one of the first steps that they're taking is to ensure that the composition of their partnership is reflective of the community that they are trying to serve. So in order to do that, they're working to capture a baseline composition of who the people in the partnership are. So if you are a member of the Rocky Mountain Partnership, we ask that you complete the survey at the bottom of your screen. It just takes a minute that will help to highlight what the composition of this partnership looks like so that work can be done to ensure that those with lived experiences, those that are impacted by system, are authentically at the table.
And if you want to learn more about the partnership and how to get involved, please reach out to our team. Thank you.